Today's episode is brought to you by Dorrington Plumbing, Gas and Electrical, and they provide quality-focused specialists for both residential and commercial plumbing, gas and electrical services. They've been doing this since 1995 and have built up a substantial reputation within the sector. If you're interested in these services, head to www.dorringtonplumbing.com.au. So hello, I'm Ben Kosterich and this is the Market Bull podcast, and joining me on the show today I have Lindsay Owler, the CEO of Indiana Resources, which is listed on the ASX under code IDA. Now, I've spoken with Bronwyn from Indiana late last year and it was a fascinating story, and since then there's been a plethora of updates and announcements to investors, and it's a very, very interesting story to say it bluntly. And first time speaking on the show with Lindsay, so welcome, Lindsay.
Thanks for having me, Ben. Good to be here.
It's a very interesting one, and I keep breadcrumbing this because we'll go into it. But if those are never familiar or haven't heard of yourself and your experience and background in mining, do you mind just explaining a little bit about how you got involved in Indiana and your almost resume up until this point of becoming CEO?
Sure. Look, I finished high school enjoying geology and fairly intent on studying an earth science at university. I went into university here in Adelaide and I studied petroleum geophysics and geology, a bit of mineral geophysics. And I came out of university straight into the mines department as a sort of intern and then as an employee working in the petroleum geophysics division. After about 18 months there, and after having done a lot of work on the side for exploration juniors, and also working for Beach Petroleum back when Beach was a junior, a busted up junior who'd had its money stolen. And I took off to Jakarta for a little while to work in petroleum exploration. And then in 1995-96, there was a gold exploration boom in the Gawler Craton in South Australia. And my home phone began to ring and it was all hands on deck in South Australia. So anybody who had ever done any geoscience work around Adelaide was under pressure to get out and do gold exploration. So I got sucked into the vortex around 95, 96 of mineral exploration and ended up working for a company called Pima Mining. And believe it or not, Pima had quite a number of areas that Indiana now holds. So when I first looked at Indiana's ground, I thought, all right, I named that prospect, I named that prospect. So I'm back in a familiar area. But in 96, 97, there was a huge boom in the Gawler Craton, and people of an age will remember that it was just on fire, and everybody who was drilling holes out there made money in the market. And the Challenger gold mine was found. That was back at the same time as the discovery by Helix of the Tunkilia gold deposit, which is still being worked on at the moment. And there were geologists and drillers in every outstation across the area. From there, I moved into working in feasibility, predominantly in a magnesium metal project in South Australia. That was a SAMAG project where we worked through some feasibility studies. Shortly after that, I ended up drilling for gold and exploring for gold for Laos for 9 or 10 years. I was with a company that had an area south of the Sepon mine near the Vietnam border, literally on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, where we found a gold deposit, and we found 3 gold deposits by the Mekong River in an area on the Thai border, very near the Mekong. And back in about 2013, I returned to my home state of Adelaide and returned with that same company. By 2013, I was doing a lot of base metals work in Africa and also in South Australia. And we did a feasibility study on a zinc copper deposit in central Queensland. We had a good discovery in Zambia, a copper cobalt discovery. And so between 2011 and 2022, did a lot of work on that deposit. Along the way, I worked on Olympic Dam style copper targets, copper and uranium targets in South Australia, nearby to Olympic Dam, and quite a number of other things. Spent some time in Canada drilling for lithium, drilled for gold in WA, lithium in WA, spent a lot of time in Santiago in Chile and looking at copper projects, porphyry copper projects over there. So a little bit of everything. And in 2022, the company I was with that had discovered the copper cobalt deposit in Zambia had that project stolen by two ministers of the Zambian government. And that led me into a pathway which ended up with me intersecting with Indiana, who had had a project stolen by the Tanzanian government. And strangely enough, both companies were using the same lawyer, an American out of London, and Tim Foden, who's an expert in this space of tenement theft by African governments and taking that to international arbitration. So I joined Indiana on the 1st of December 2024, so I'm just 6.5 months into my time with Indiana, and I joined at a time when Indiana had just received the second of 3 settlement payments from the Tanzanian government, and we can go into this in a minute. But basically, the company was moving full flight in exploration. On the day I started, there was a drill rig finishing, another one starting a few days later, and so we hit the ground running. And Indiana, and my role with Indiana is quite central in the space of where I operate, in mineral exploration and in the administration of public companies and shareholder relations, all these sorts of things. So that takes us up to present day. We've been drilling semi-continuously since the day I started, and we'll have another diamond drilling rig starting next Wednesday. So lots of activity with Indiana.
Yeah, from the sounds of it, you've been a global explorer working in jurisdictions all over the world, but interesting to hear that you sort of found your way into South Australia 30 years ago and still there. And yeah, for many, the Gawler Craton is quite a significant area. There's some large-scale mines still operating, and gold at the moment has just taken flight in more ways than one with the price in the US, and it just continues to trend upwards. And we'll go through about the projects in a moment, but I think one of the important things for listeners is if they do want to hear the full story about what happened with the projects in Tanzania, to listen to the previous episode I did with Bronwyn, which details a lot of that. But as you said, you joined when a lot of this was coming towards the formation or the final point of this long and tedious journey. And for many, it's an understanding that you are getting pretty much paid money in US from the Tanzania government for this wrongdoing and this settlement that occurred. But what does that really mean for listeners that are trying to figure out, well, how much cash and what does that put in Indiana's bank balance? Because as we've found out, that the mine that was in Indiana's portfolio is actually operating for a different company, but in lieu of that, you are getting a substantial amount of US funds, which puts you in a pretty unique spot as an explorer to have quite a lot of cash after dividend payout. So do you mind just, probably articulating and explaining that a bit more as well? I probably just took a few things from you there, but yeah, please talk to us about this from a small cap perspective.
Yeah, well, the very brief background is that Indiana took the Tanzanian government to an international tribunal called ICSID, the International Centre for Settlement of Investment Disputes. It put forward a case, and initially from an outsider's point of view, looking at Indiana's case, it was quite straightforward, and the way that the Tanzanian government took the asset from the company was blunt and easily outlined to a tribunal. So they did that. They got to a situation where the tribunal awarded them more money than they had spent. They put a multiple on the money spent. Then it came time to collect the money, and unlike other African countries or Southeast Asian countries or places in the world where you might have an asset taken from you by a government force, Tanzania didn't have significant US dollars offshore to be seized. And so it made sense for the company to negotiate a settlement that was sort of in between the extreme award that was given, which was going to be in the order of $120 million US, and what the country, what the government might be able to pay. And so that settlement ended up being $90 million in 3 instalments, 35, 25, and 30 million US, and those instalments were spread out over 9 months or so. And that gave the Tanzanian government the opportunity to pay the money. Now, we're very pleased to say that Tanzania paid its first, second and third instalment under the settlement agreement, and the company obviously incurred costs in litigating that matter, and having paid back the costs, and in particular the litigation financing, it's left the company and its minority shareholders in the Tanzanian entities with settlement funds to distribute. So the company has announced that the minority shareholders of one of its subsidiaries has commenced an arbitration proceeding, and there's a disagreement over how much money that entity is owed, and so the arbitration is based in Perth, and we're looking forward to getting on with that and to get that matter settled appropriately. It's also the case that the Tanzanian government ducked in at the last minute, paid us our third and final payment, and then slipped in with a tax bill which was expressly forbidden under the settlement agreement. So unfortunately and distractingly, we've had to kick off the litigation under the settlement agreement against Tanzania to say you're not in a position to levy any of those taxes. You have agreed, and the government has signed off that there won't be a levying of taxes, and we just need to have that matter heard quickly, and I'm sure that that opportunistic tax assessment can be dealt with appropriately. And from there on, the company has been distributing money back to its shareholders. On the 20th of December 2024, the company paid a 5-cent per share dividend. That was a special dividend, and that was quite spectacular. I've certainly never been involved with a junior company before that's paid a special dividend, and it's because of the exceptional circumstances that the company was able to. The company's finalising a ruling with the ATO at the moment, and we hope to make a second disbursement to our shareholders ASAP. We hope to do it before June 30. It's now obviously not going to be possible, but we hope to be able to, early in the new financial year, have a capital return in a similar scale to the dividend we paid in December, around about 5 cents per share. And coming to the end of that, we will need to settle our differences with the minority shareholders out of Tanzania, and then look at what the remaining funds will be. Having said all that, the baseline for the exploration work going forward is not less than 10 million Australian dollars in the kitty for exploration over the next 2 years. So shareholders and potential shareholders should understand that Indiana will not be cum raise for some time, and 10 million is the baseline, is the minimum. It's possible that there'll be more available for exploration expenditure and overheads than that. So that'll keep us very active and well funded for the next 2.5, 3 years.
Which again, not many can say in this current climate that they are financially secure, or at least not needing to urge to go back to raise funds. And 2.5 years, or near 2, we'll wait and see what happens with the drilling, is a substantial runway and gives confidence to investors. And that really elaborates and goes on to what these projects are in South Australia. Now, as we said at the outset, the primary focus is gold, but if you don't mind just explaining a little bit about what the Minnos project is in South Australia, and there's been a flurry of really drilling, as you said, since you joined the team. What's been unfolding, and whereabouts is this project located?
Okay, so Indiana bought a package of Central Gawler Craton tenements. Now, the Gawler Craton is a big geologically stable area of old crystalline rocks that's in the middle of South Australia. It extends from just west of Adelaide, across the Gulf from Adelaide, right across to almost to Euclid near the West Australian border. In the south, it extends out to sea, arguably touches Antarctica, and in the north, it extends right up north towards the APY and Gupit Jarrah lands. So it's this big, stable block that's been through 3 different orogenies, 3 different compression metamorphism events, and so the rock has been there, like the Yilgarn Craton and the Pilbara in the west. It's also host to a number of mineral deposits, and we know from Olympic Dam, Carrapateena, Prominent Hill, and now Oak Dam that there's a huge copper endowment, a copper and gold endowment in that eastern portion of the Gawler Craton. And we know from a fantastic result from Dominion at their Challenger gold mine in South Australia that there are gold deposits dotted around the place. Now, even though I mentioned earlier that there was a Gawler Craton exploration boom in the mid-90s, what we look at in South Australia, if it were in the Yilgarn Craton, it would have literally 10 times as much drilling and would have had 10 times or more spent on it had it been in that jurisdiction, that very favourable mining jurisdiction of Western Australia. Western Australia gets 69.9 cents in the exploration dollar every year, and South Australia gets about 4.5 cents per square kilometre. So South Australia has a couple of things that's holding that expenditure back, and towards Olympic Dam, that is a cover of sedimentary rock. So every drill hole that you drill looking for a new Olympic Dam, you have to drill through between 1 and 400 metres of sedimentary cover. So it's very expensive. And so you have to push your geophysical modelling at depth to the limits to be able to target your holes. Where we are in the central Gawler Craton is a bit different. We have got some areas of shallow cover, but fundamentally there are some surface geochemistry techniques that take you to roughly the right area. That's a calcrete geochemistry technique. To an extent, soil sampling works, and certainly aeromagnetics and geological mapping work very well because of generally shallow cover. So South Australia's missed out on some exploration because of that cover. It's also missed out on some exploration because of very, very slow to stalled native title process in South Australia. So one of the reasons I was happy to get involved with Indiana was that their block of tenements that they acquired in the central Gawler Craton was in a favourable area with regards to native title authority and heritage clearances. And the areas where we're drilling, we have those clearances in place already. And for companies that don't, that can be a process that takes years or may never happen. And for junior explorers, that stops money being spent in South Australia.
And I think as of, realistically, the 28th of May was one of the announcements I saw about the RC drilling campaign, and I'm sure there's still a plethora of results to come back. But this was, again, targeting some areas that you've done the due diligence on and realistically done the research on. What is that really already starting to reveal about this area? And when you're talking about 15 of the 27 have already been done or completed, I'm sure the rest have been done and are now at labs potentially. What are some of the preliminary ideas, or what are you hoping that this might show further down the track?
Yeah, well, look, we're just looking to continue to inch out in all directions in terms of the size of the Minos gold deposit. We haven't found the edges, and there's not a gold surface expression at Minos to speak of. And so we haven't got a good feel for how wide it is. We can make bolder assumptions about how deep it might go, but that becomes academic at a point. And given that the next target to the southeast along this Lake Labyrinth shear zone, which is the main mineralised structure in the area of Minos, and what Minos is hosted up against, Ariadne is only 300-400 metre walk away from Minos, so we can't say with any confidence that the two don't join up. We haven't sterilised that area in the middle, and where there is drilling in the middle, there are some gold results. So I'm blessed in this case with a lot of targets, and Minos, the Lake Labyrinth Shear Zone with Minos Gold Deposit, the Ariadne Prospect, Company World Prospect, it is an area where you could reasonably be drilling for years and years, and it's an area that's clearly, it's got a demonstrable gold endowment. It's an area that had historic gold workings and some high-grade gold workings. There were a number of areas at Ariadne and Company Well where post the World Wars people were wheelbarrowing high-grade dirt into the Tarcoola battery nearby, and that's what led to some exploration in the area, and the additional ounces that the ground has to give that are not revealed by those near-surface scratchings is what my job and the job of our exploration manager and project geologist to uncover.
Well, I think you just said there could be, it's hard to identify how big and vast this might be, but that probably ties into the continued drilling program that you've got. And I note that you're doing some diamond drilling from some of the recent announcements. Mm-hmm. I can imagine your campaign is going well and truly into August, and I don't know about necessarily the seasonality complexities of exploring in South Australia. I know Western Australia has its hot and wet seasons when activity can't be continuing, but how far into advance are you planning to be doing this drilling, and then, or is it an area that you can just continuously over the next 2 years do your evaluation, get your results, and then just continue going week in, week out? What's the outline of operations at Minos?
Well, look, we're not restricted by seasonality other than it gets very, very hot in December and January. December 24 and January of this year, we drilled up until shortly before Christmas, and we drilled from, I can't remember, the 8th of January or the 6th of January. But we don't set out deliberately. That was possibly due to inevitable drilling delays in November. Otherwise, we could have finished earlier. But the program ended up running from October until February. It was a similar program to the one we're in the midst of at the moment. So we would prefer not to drill in December and January, and you sort of tend to wear your field staff down, and not unreasonably, it's bloody hot. But other than that, we don't have any restrictions. Right now it's perfect. It's 22, 24 degrees during the day. It's chilly for an hour in the morning, but that's fine. And you're quite right. What you said earlier, our RC rig has just finished up and moved to a different site, and the diamond rig comes on site on Wednesday of next week. That'll be roughly the 18th, I think, of June. Mm-hmm. And that diamond rig will be there until August. So our RC drilling went very well. They punched the holes out faster than we expected, arrived later than was expected, drilled faster than was expected, and left on schedule. I'm happy to say. So that's good for all concerned. And but look, to be honest, Ben, we could be drilling with an RC rig all year. We have targets, and we'll get on to how we're approaching some of the nearby regional targets in a little while, I'm sure. But we're working hard to make sure that those more expensive reverse circulation percussion drilling meters that go into those regional targets at Ariadne and Company Well are very well spent. We don't want to get anything wrong and appear to sterilise.
Not drill for the sake of drilling.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I've been in that position too often in my past. We want to be drilling where we know we are answering very pertinent questions in the best possible spot. And at the moment, as I alluded to earlier, we're spoilt for choice. We've got plenty of places where we could drill, and so the idea is to make it clear to ourselves where the highest priorities are, how to drill them, how to attack it, the geometry of what may or may not be there, and then get on with that job.
And going on further from that, there's note that you'll be, doing a scoping study and really painting the picture for investors. And I think naturally the maiden gold resource estimation is a big indication of the one of the steps towards a potential deposit in the long term. What sort of timeline and or progress are you making on that, and when can investors realistically get some more updates and news flows surrounding that?
Yeah, well, look, we have employed people and engaged contractors specifically to get this scoping study underway, and we have been underway with elements of it since March of this year. Minos was first drilled in the 90s, and it's been episodic ever since, and it's been looked at by good geologists over the years, but it's been looked at by a number of different geologists who have logged it differently and have come and gone for campaigns. And so we're investing time and effort in re-logging all the existing holes there, be them RC chips or diamond core. We have put some time and effort into making sure that this logging event is the definitive logging event, and so that when we get to the end of it, we have useful information that can be used to build the first building blocks of that resource estimation, which is a geological model. At the moment, we can't build it because there are 6 or 7 different sets of geology codes across the deposit, and there needs to be only one. And we need to, if a geologist has been helicoptered in literally for 3 weeks to drill a few holes, they might not have all the background information that they needed to log the geology correctly. So we're correcting that. We're also going through the database, which needed some tidying up to bring it up to scratch, so that when we do hand this package over later in 2025 to a resource geologist to do a maiden resource estimation, they're looking at information that can just say, right, everything's here, I can get on with it. Because if we don't do that, then we can't get JORC. We can't bring the information to JORC standards, then we're going to be looping back and disappointing people. So we're bringing that work forward and making sure that everything going forward is tidied up. That's taking some time, and we can't guarantee that exactly how long it'll take. But in terms of the re-logging exercise, as of yesterday, we were 100 holes into a 160-hole re-logging exercise, and so that can give people some idea of where we're up to. In parallel to that, maiden resource estimation, we are providing and compiling right at the moment as we speak 3 metallurgical samples to go off to labs in Perth. These samples will cover areas of the deposit that are the oxidised area at the top, the transitional zone in the middle, and the fresh zone to depth. And so that these 3 metallurgical samples can be go through the usual scoping metallurgical work. They'll go through a grinding and gravity separation process and some cyanide leach testing, and it'll give us an idea of the recoveries and from gravity process, from cyanide processes and so on, and will anchor feasibility going forward. It'll leave us with plenty of optimisation work still to do, I'm sure, but it'll set us off in a direction appropriate for scoping level. Once the resource and that scoping metallurgy is completed and given us some direction, then we can start to look at things like engineering and get other things like baseline environmental underway. So it's a process that we have to de-risk before. There's not a lot of point doing detailed engineering when you don't know what the plant's going to look like. So we have to take the things step by step and move through them sensibly. But, having said that, gold, if you want to be designing a plant and doing metallurgical test work, you should be using off-the-shelf technologies for gold. It's a tried and true metal, and there are potentially some pitfalls such as refractory gold, but otherwise, it's easier and cheaper to get to bankability than it is for a lot of other metals.
And I think one of the fascinations I've seen in particular in the gold sector over the course of even doing this podcast is there's been a variety of other resources that have overshot up and down, but gold has just been this consistent growth. And yes, it's gone on a substantial run recently, and gold producers are loving it, and explorers are now hopefully getting some trickle-on effects, but it hasn't necessarily got the exact same volatility that we have seen in the lithium and even the uranium and some of the other markets, which all still have their places, but puts a lot more excess stress and pressures on explorers at the end of the day, given that you cannot put anything into your numbers and your estimations if the price is so vastly different every third week. So that's another big sort of shining help for anyone in exploring. But alongside you, there is likely a field team, but there's also a management team, and I think that's also very important, is the leadership and the people on the board and helping with the strategy and direction. So who else is alongside you driving this strategy and pushing towards some of these really quite notable announcements in the coming months and years, really?
Well, look, I inherited, to be fair, a direction on a highway with a bunch of roads in front of me. And so it is easier to be spoilt for choice, as is the case with Indiana, than scraping around to try to work out what you might do. Which is often the case with junior explorers, trying to talk up something but not prepared to put a drill bit into the ground. And in that regard, Bronwyn Barnes, the executive chairman of Indiana, was primarily concerned with acquiring this package and we hold it 100%, of Central Gawler Craton tenements. On the board, Bob Adam has a long history of working in mineral processing engineering and feasibility and so on, and is a steady hand and a sort of somebody who will quietly observe and then, understand where maybe the direction might need to be corrected or where some of his contacts from around WA would become useful. So Bob's a great contact. Maya Maguire on the board has a legal background, and the need for somebody on the board with a legal background's very apparent in terms of Indiana, but certainly very enthusiastic, and Maya has been pushing me to get out onto some of the regional targets and continuing to sort of spread our geographical wings. In addition to that, we have an exploration manager who's from the Adelaide Hills but really worked in South Australia. He's worked everywhere but. His name's Tony Rudd, and Tony is a seasoned exploration manager type. And we have a project geologist by the name of Joe Booker, who's been logging the drill holes at Minos since 2022. And out of anybody who's had a look at those rocks in the past, Joe's certainly got his eye in more so than most. And so Joe has been, along with an assistant, has been doing this re-logging exercise. As an extension to our team, we have been using some classic West Perth service providers, Model Earth on Collins Street there. John Standing and his great team were out for some time last year and are working with our guys as fantastic technical sounding boards for all sorts of more technical mineralogical, economic geology issues. Southern Geoscience was kind enough to promote one of South Australia's favourite geophysicists and relocate him to Perth. So we get the strength of Southern Geoscience's bandwidth and experience in mineral exploration geophysics with the guy that has, been contracted to do all the QAQC and processing and so on. For instance, the state government aeromagnetic surveys in South Australia. So these are the sorts of people we're using. We're spoilt for choice in Adelaide. We have three main assay labs. We have ALS, Intertech and Bureau Veritas. Bureau Veritas has done all the analytical work for Minos to date, so we're sticking with Bureau Veritas, at least for the time being, and we're perfectly well serviced, and the team is functioning nicely.
Yeah, spoilt for choice, especially across Western Australia and South Australia, and hey, Australia period is really just a great mining jurisdiction, and the skills and the qualities of the people around is in line with that. But we talked about at the very beginning before we started that podcasts are fascinating. People might only take away one or two or three key points, and I always like to hand it over to my guests to really emphasise the key takeaways that they'd urge listeners, investors, whoever's that maybe taken or learned something from this to remember? So if there was 3 key things you'd urge them to take away and remember, what would those 3 points be?
Look, I think the primary point for people looking to invest in exploration companies on the ASX at the moment in gold is that Indiana has effectively no enterprise value for its gold. Right now, our market cap's about $51 million. Right at the moment, we have $72 million in the bank and are paying our exploration bills from the interest on term deposits, something that's not very many junior companies can say. And
no, not at all.
So although the market has a concern about exactly how many dollars we're going to have left at the end of the day, we're going to have plenty, and we won't become rays for quite some time. And so people who invest in Indiana are essentially buying something that's valued at less than its cash, has like cracking gold exploration results over the last couple of years that the company is confident enough about that it's taking into feasibility via the scoping study. And so essentially you're getting a gold project for free. And to underpin that, there will be in the next few months a 5-cent return to shareholders. So there's that safeguard. So we are a fantastic punt, and we're certainly not overpriced. We're nowhere near what our price needs to be. We are seriously cheap on the market, and that's because we're transitioning out of a litigation play where people are punting on whether or not we get the money, or we got the last payment a few weeks ago, and we announced that on the 7th of April. The money cleared, and the money cleared for us at a time when Mr. Trump had made the Australian dollar was very, very weak on the day we got our money, so we did particularly well.
It's a good currency conversion rate, isn't it?
It was excellent. We were very, very pleased. We got through a window that was only open for about 48 hours. So cash, gold results are the 2 primary things. News flow is the 3rd one, because there's no point getting stuck in an explorer that has is illiquid with low volumes, because it's not doing anything. It's trickling off sideways. We are generating assays daily. We have so many batches in the lab. We'll continue. We'll be cutting core until September. We'll be feeding assays through to the market from the drilling that we've just completed or starting next week until October. In that same period, we will be getting things like initial metallurgical recoveries and results from regional exploration out. So that news flow is just exceptional. It's just what people should be looking for. We're spending our money on turning a drill bit and analysing those samples. In the background, we have 2 other projects which are also in the Central Gawler Craton. One of them is adjacent to Minos, which is a rare earth project where we're ticking along with the rare earth metallurgy there, and it's one of these things that's a neodymium heavy deposit. And so when you have, whether or not Trump's tweet last night solved the battery metal problem or not, I doubt, but it's one of these things where, as a junior explorer, we need to be cognizant that something like the rare earth market, in particular specific metals to go into magnets and so on, could just go parabolic at any stage. So we're keeping that moving. And in the background, we have a titanium target that we're working on getting our access approvals for.
It sounds undoubtedly you've got a lot on your plate and plenty busy. And I think when I look at what happens on the ASX with companies that have been in positions where projects have been taken and upheaved from them, this is quite a win for the company. Usually this isn't the case. And I think, yes, it's been a treacherous and quite a tedious process to get there, but understanding that all the money has been paid out and now the company has... they probably would have originally liked the project, but that there's been some good come of it and cash to explore. And as you alluded to, the fact that the market isn't taking into account any of these projects is leave it to listeners to understand what that means. But for those that are interested in following the company, you'll probably be speaking on numerous podcasts, as we all do these days. there's the website, but how best can investors reach out or connect with you to learn more and have a conversation at the end of the day?
Sure. Well, look, the company can reach out to us through our website. They should certainly subscribe to our updates and really keep an eye on Twitter, on X, and on LinkedIn, where we are quite active in updating people about exactly where we're at in terms of the activities we've announced formally to the exchange, and then within those activities, what we're doing and how we're progressing.
Oh, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for speaking on the show today, Lindsay. Your workload is not going to be subsiding anytime soon from the sounds of it, and there's going to be plenty over the next financial year. But thank you so much for taking the time to speak on the show, and looking forward to touching base in the coming months, in the next financial year, really, to find out what's been unearthed at Minnos.
Thank you very much for having me on today, Ben. I very much appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Market Bull podcast. Please remember that the topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial advice. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, share, and follow. You can follow the Market Bull on all our socials and keep up to date with global market insights.